Alright, so I've been dissecting the 1915. I figured I'd give you guys a little heads up of what killed it. Originally I thought that we oil starved it because my buddy was running around doing donuts in it, and I figured all the oil sloshed to one side and we just ran it out of oil. It had a problem with number one rod, and what it did was it spun the rod bearing. And I wish I would have videoed that a little better, but it was, yeah, like that when I found it. What it did was it jumped the little tangs that are in there that keep the rod bearings in there. And what I found is the other three rods, two of them, the rod bearing shell fits in there nice. And when you usually get a rod bearing, you got to really push it in there and it will stay in there. But what I found is this one right here has like no springiness to it whatsoever. You can put it in the groove and it just like slides around. You can see actually it's got like gap over there. I don't know if you can put a feeler gauge in between here, believe me. I know I don't have both in, but usually, you know, if you've ever taken a Volkswagen motor apart, you know that it will snap into one half. That's how you put the rods together. So then I wanted to figure out, okay, spun a rod bearing, what type of cam is it in there? And that's when I made the discovery of what actually killed this thing. I don't know if it was the original manufacturer. I know people probably, they'll see the name on the side of this thing and jump to a conclusion. But I do know that this thing was in a notchback when my buddy got it. And I don't know if the gentleman owned the notchback, because you buy a motor from mail order companies and then you are, you know, it's up to you to install it. So, you know, some people probably shouldn't be doing this stuff, unfortunately. But what I found in there was this oil pump and this cover. Now, usually, if you're going to use this cover, you're going to have a standard oil pump. You can have a thicker 30 millimeter or whatever, but you can't use this. And what this is an oil pump for like a filtered pump, like mine over here that I got off the stock motor that I broke like a goof. And if you notice, this is actually a quality one. That one over there is not. It has the two ports, and what happens is oil gets spun around the gears, trapped in between the gears, gets spun around, and normally there's a hole down there. Let me show you on this one. Alright, oil goes in there, gear moves it in between the teeth here, around the outside, and over this way. And normally the factory would have a hole drilled there on like a Volkswagen pump, right about there. And if you can see, this slot here lines up with that hole there that goes back into the engine case. This is for a filtered pump, and what they do is they just don't drill that hole all the way through. They drill it, you know, about 3/4 of the way through, and then they drill through this side straight down. Alright, so if you use this pump cover on there, you just blocked off your oil flow. The only reason this thing was even driving around and actually doing anything is because of the gasket. The gasket and the silicone that they used, which is the same silicone they used to seal the cylinders, which was done by whoever originally built this. This gasket is just thick enough to let some oil squeeze through and go into this galley and on into the engine. So I don't know how many street miles were on it when it was in a notch. I know my buddy probably put a couple of 100 miles on it. I'm not exactly sure. And then we put it in the Baja and we drove it around, and we probably put maybe 20-30 miles until we started getting romping on it in the sand and doing donuts, and that's when it finally spun a rod bearing. But it did it because not the rod's fault all the way, but because of this. Somebody put the wrong cover on here. It should have had a filtered pump cover like that. So, life lesson, check your parts. If you are going to take a motor and put in a bus, let's say, and it has a filter pump, change your pump. If you get a mail order motor, might not be a bad idea to pull this cover off, pull those gears out, and look, you know, is there a hole in there? Because that right there killed this engine. And if it was a normal person, you'd be paying for a full rebuild. I'll be able to find some cheap parts and throw this thing back together. I think this motor retails for about $3,000 without the extras. And it has some extras. It has an Engel 120 cam, which I don't believe they come with from Mafoco for their 1915s. I believe they come with a 110. It came with steel push rods, which is an extra. It came with heavy-duty solid shafts, which I believe is an extra. And it came with 042s, but I think the 042s are standard for their 1915 setups. It came with AA pistons, which I'll end up probably changing out. But just wanted to let you guys know, you know, you gotta watch stuff out there. Just because it's supposed to be from an expert doesn't always mean that it's done right. And also, just on a used engine, I don't know the whole history. This may have not been done by the people that built it. This may have been done by the guy that got it home, paid the extra $35-40 for the filter pump option, and when he got it home, he figured out, oh man, I can't put this in my car because of that mount here and this big fan shroud that fits all there. And he decided, I'll just take that cover off, pop this one on there, and I'll be good, and had none the wiser, knowing that there's no hole there. So, hopefully y'all have some good times playing with your cars, and just watch what we're doing. Everybody makes mistakes. Sometimes mistakes are no big deal. Sometimes they cost people money. This one, unfortunately, really doesn't cost me money. It cost my buddy a motor, you know, because he ended up trading me a stocker that ran. For this one, it doesn't. So, you know, and I'll have to get some parts for it. But just have some fun. Just keep an eye out on what we're doing. Let's keep these things going. And remember, if you like any of the videos, please subscribe. You know, watch some of the other ones. I got some stuff, other stuff out there people might want to be interested in, you know. And have a good night.